Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I'm with a journalist. He writes for KEXP. He has also written for Passion of the Weiss, Fanbyte.
Mm-hmm.
He has also written for Pitchfork. He really is a journalist. Like, he's literally written for like 4 or 5 different news outlets. Right now he focuses on KEXP. I've known who he was for a while, but recently he wrote something about me on KEXP about my interview with AJ Suede, and I was like, man, I'm really getting some credits out here. So it was time to have him on the show. It's my pleasure. Oh, also, before I say my pleasure, to introduce, this episode is a little Seattle centric, but also there's going to be some good gems here for artists all across the globe. I'd like to talk to him about how artists can form relationships with media outlets for press. And also we're going to talk about the state of media in Seattle. It's my pleasure to have on Martin Douglas.
What's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on?
I'm just chilling, dog. You know, it's I'm going to be saying this for the next few episodes, but just had the 3rd year anniversary of the podcast.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Been doing your thing.
Yeah. And it's time. I feel like I have some roots in Seattle now, and it's time to really focus on building with others in Seattle. I kind of feel these first few years, while I've met a lot of people, it can kind of be a little isolating, and I don't know who to bounce ideas off of because there's not a lot of podcasts in Seattle, and the podcasts that are in Seattle, a lot of them come to me to be like my clients to produce. So I feel like this is going to almost be a really nerdy episode, just to be honest here.
Yeah, we might go deep in the weeds. That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, but I'm thankful that you're here, and I know who you are, but I want the audience, for those who don't know who you are, to have a little bit more of a better understanding of who you are before we get deep into the weeds. So first, tell people where you're from, like where you were born.
All right. So yeah, as NAST said, my name's Martin Douglas. I was born in El Paso, moved to North Carolina when I was a small child, grew up there. Moved here when I was about 15 years old, 2 weeks after my 15th birthday. And now I am almost 39. So I've been here a long fucking time.
Damn. That's wild. So do you still hold Texas as a special place in your heart at all?
Well, I moved to North Carolina when I was 2 years old. So okay. I still have a little of sort of buried nostalgia for North Carolina, but I don't know. I consider Tacoma my home. I lived there for 23 years. Just moved to Greenwood, North Seattle last year. So
hell yeah.
still a Tacoma dude in my personal view and the view of many others.
Mm-hmm. What is a Tacoma person called? Because we're Seattleites. What are you, Tacoma dudes? Is that what you're called?
I mean, I've never heard Tacomans. That's what it is. Tacomans.
Okay, a Roman Tacoman. Okay, I get it. So, what brought your family out here to Tacoma?
Well, I kind of had a tumultuous childhood. So I was bouncing around between relatives, group homes, foster homes. And then one day my dad was like, I'll take him. And so I moved out here, my biological dad and my stepmom, who I loved before, unfortunately they're both passed. But lived with them and my half brother and my 3 stepsisters, and it was quite the time.
Damn, that's a lot of moving around, a lot of family members right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you close with your siblings growing up?
Yeah, we were pretty close. I mean, we were really in a tight space. So it's one of those things where you're kind of basically in the foxhole with your siblings, just growing up trying to make your way, right?
And I was reading some of your articles about how music played like a role in your life, and the mixture between growing up and listening to hip hop, but then finding like indie music,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a weird thing because when you were growing up, it was like almost weird to listen to a different genre. Like almost if sometimes genre and race played a role into like the type of music you listen to. But me, I'm listening to all genres, and I don't really think about that. But it's kind of weird growing up that that's something you kind of had to think about. You know?
Yeah, it's culturally accepted now. Like I talk about that to a lot of people, in that there are no boundaries because music is so easily accessible, and it's not divided amongst, any kind of identity. So you could you could listen to rap, and you could listen to indie rock, and you can listen to country, and you can listen to jazz, which I do all of those things.
Same.
I listen to a whole lot of different genres of music. And yeah, when I was growing up, it was kind of like a fight, like a fight to be accepted for liking things that were different from the purview or the box that people are put in, specifically young black males.
Yeah, it's very hypocritical though if you think about it. Like, for example, the other day I looked up when you think of a band. Okay, first of all, when you think of the banjo, what do you think of?
I mean, I do think of like bluegrass.
Okay.
Like straight up like country line dancing bluegrass music.
Right.
But I think I know where you're going with this.
But it was like, but the banjo is made by slaves. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, or like we can go into like rock and roll and Elvis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's weird how those boxes have been put up with genres, even though where a lot of these different genres came from aren't from the people that like gatekeep those genres to begin with.
Right. And even though rock music is being accepted by people of all different races, I do like to point out in my work that it was an innovation of black people, because I think that is something that young black people should take pride in.
Yeah, 100%. I remember, when was this? What was his name? Dwayne Jackson. He's popping off now, but like in 2019, he was like one of my first 20 or 30 guests, and he had a show at I think El Corazon, and he's this black guy that's very edgy, had never been to Seattle before, and he talked about how he felt like an outcast when he was making like rock and roll type music. It's like almost like a mixture between like rock and roll and hip hop. But it doesn't always have to be a hip hop song, or it doesn't always have to be a rock and roll song. It doesn't always have to be a blend either. So it's like he does. It's almost like 3 different genres he partakes in, and he kind of felt like an outcast. But then he came to Seattle, and like just the environment of like grunge music and all that was like very exciting to him, and he killed his show, And but just hearing him talk about how he felt like an outcast in rock and roll in 2019 even.
Yeah.
And then we still don't have that many black rock and roll bands in Seattle. Like it's almost like you can name them off the top of your what is that saying? Off your hands or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I guess there's still like maybe a little. Do you think there's any fear maybe when it comes to certain genres to perform in, or is it maybe it's just still not highlighted enough on TV for people to be like, that's what I want to be?
I think it's an issue of it not being marketed. I don't want to go into conspiracy theories or anything, but like I think big companies, they have something to gain when they can say, oh, this genre of music is for white people, this genre of music is for black people, and whatever. But I mean, going back to the idea of like black fronted bands, or all black bands in Seattle, like there is kind of a a growing generation of black rock artists in Seattle. I mean, you have Black Ends, you have Enumclaw, you even on the bigger level, you have Aaron Jones and the Black Tones. You have Maya Marie, who's absolutely fucking brilliant. There are a lot of black rock musicians. I feel as though there's a renaissance bubbling up. It hasn't reached the surface yet, but it's starting to bubble a little bit.
Yeah. And I also at the same time, I almost feel like it seems in certain ways genres are kind of starting to blend together, and with that, maybe there's less gatekeeping with certain genres when you start to see more like a Lil Wayne with a Travis Barker or whatever those type of collabs.
Or even like the indie artist Barty Strange, like he's a black man that plays what is nominally considered indie rock music, but he blends all sorts of genres. He blends rap. He had Arm & Hammer on his shit once. Ooh. He does country, he does pop. He is one of those artists that really uses music as a melting pot just to kind of see where it goes. And I think it's super interesting.
So tell people like how you first discovered rock, because it really does seem like that played like a role in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So as with a lot of people in my generation, I was a Nirvana kid. Like I was watching MTV and I saw the video for Smells Like Teen Spirit. I must have been 8 years old and was like, what is this? Because, as we were speaking on earlier in the show, like I would have had no way to discover that through someone else in my life. Like I was living with my biological mom at the time, and she listened to rap. She listened to like old funk music. Like she listened to some R&B, but there was no basis for rock music in the household. So I kind of discovered it on my own. And then after listening to Nirvana, I was like, wow, there's a whole different world of music that I've yet to discover. And I was always a curious kid. So I just dove in and, started listening to bands like the Raincoats and the Velvet Underground and other bands from Seattle. I don't want to say grunge bands because I feel as though Nirvana wasn't a grunge band. Nirvana was a punk band. Nirvana was a hard rock band, but they weren't quite grunge.
Right.
But I did listen to grunge. I loved Alice in Chains. Like I still think those first few albums are phenomenal. Mudhoney, Screaming Trees, these are all bands that I kind of listened to and sampled, and I watched the alternative MTV show 120 Minutes. So like I was educating myself in the world of rock music.
So do you feel like Seattle artists were highlighted pretty well during that time though?
Oh yeah, this was the early 90s. I feel like the Seattle rock scene was like the big thing, right? And I've read so many books and have watched so many documentaries and just really like even firsthand accounts about how major labels were swarming on Seattle in the early 90s because of this sound, because of grunge and the sludgy, slow, really hard rock that came from here. And like it's very indicative of this gray, muddy, sometimes depressing place.
Do you think that would have been like the golden era for music in Seattle for like being highlighted? But then there's also like the Macklemore era where you also hear about like artists trying to follow that wave of music, right, and get signed making similar music. And then I've also heard in the 90s when record labels were coming, they're like, sound more like Nirvana or blah, 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 and signing whoever that fit that type of sound. Do you think it's relatable to the Macklemore era, or not even really close?
I do think it's relatable. I think it's a much it's probably a much bigger thing when you talk about the 90s. True. Because when the industry kind of swarmed on Seattle during the Macklemore era, it was very clear that Macklemore was the mainstream star that was coming out of here. And being a fan, being a student, being a participant in Seattle's underground hip hop scene, like there were so many incredible acts that these labels weren't even touching. Like they wanted the people who sounded like Macklemore, but they weren't thinking about Shabazz Palaces and Porter Ray and I'll Fight You and, you know, these great acts, Satisfaction, these incredible acts that were kind of underneath the surface and were maybe a little too weird to get that mainstream attention. I can't say that about Porter Ray. Porter Ray should have a major label deal for sure.
Yeah, 100%. That's So what would you describe the 90s as then? Like so they wanted something like Nirvana, but then they could also have been like, I want something like Soundgarden or
exactly.
So there were enough people blowing up around the same time.
Yes, there were enough industry standards. There were enough marquee bands that didn't really sound exactly the same to where it was like, oh, if I can get a band that does their spin on whatever this grunge thing is, then maybe they'll blow up. And a lot of people did.
Got it. And I also read that you were big into skateboarding when you were growing up.
Yeah.
When you were, if you went to like a skate park, and I want to relate this to what Travis, because I just had Travis Thompson on the podcast. Check that out. Travis was saying when he went to the skate park growing up, people were playing hip hop, and when he tried to show people Green Day or whatever, they're like, "What is this?" Versus when you were going to the skate park, do you feel like it was more people listening to like rock music and kind of not being into hip hop?
Well, that's kind of funny. First of all, I was a total poser. Like there were also, growing up in North Carolina, there weren't that many skate parks. So like I would like skateboard on the sidewalk in front of the gravel driveway by my apartment and, you know, try to like sometimes sneak my skateboard to school after hours and try to do bad kick flips and, you know, grind and fall and bust my ass. But going back to your question, I feel as though like in that era, and we're talking about again like the early 90s here, like skate videos were pretty diverse. Like I remember there being a lot of rap in skate videos, like even farther than like the Beastie Boys. There would be, you know, all sorts of cool underground acts or even like gangster rap, because I feel like the skaters understood that. Skaters like the defiance of rap, like the attitude of rap. And so it fit hand in hand with like the punk music that was, you know, going on in those skateboard videos. Like I remember there being very iconic black skaters like Stevie Williams, like Kareem Campbell. Like those guys were icons to the people who really skated in my generation.
Yeah, that makes sense then. And I also feel like definitely in the there must have been like a flip though, because like in the early 90s hip hop probably seemed rebellious, but then there was like a flip where like it became like the biggest thing, and like
because the corporations realized that they could make money. Once these suits, these executives were like, oh, hip hop's not a fad. Oh, people
Mm.
are really spending their money on this thing. That's when they got on the gravy train.
Damn, that's a good point. What about like interesting? So how long do you think it took until like Sir Mix-a-Lot was able to like get commercial success off of Baby Got Back then?
Well,
Because
I
that must
know
have been late 80s,
it was
right?
like, I think it was like 92. If
Okay.
I'm not mistaken, it was like 92, and then he was bubbling and kind of bubbling underneath the surface, and then and then in like 88 he put out Posse on Broadway, which is like still one of the iconic Seattle rap songs of all time.
Yeah. Oh, ooh, I just completely hit the mic there. But that's because I guess he's probably one of the few Seattle artists that have really had commercial success on that level with a song like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder if you could say he played a part. I should have him on to ask him about that.
Absolutely.
But he probably
No,
played a part in like commercial hip hop success.
Mix is an icon.
Yeah.
I think people sleep on Mix, and people feel as though Baby Got Back is a novelty song. But when you hear him talk about it, when you hear him say that he made that song in reaction to European body standards, and then it becomes a hit, like a major hit, it was a real big moment for Seattle hip hop. I feel as though it was a turning point. Like you could even say that Posse on Broadway was a turning point, but Baby Got Back was huge.
And when did you start like getting into like how old were you when you started figuring out about like Seattle music? So was it Nirvana at first? How old were you then? You're like early teens?
So yeah, it was Nirvana first, and yeah, I was 8 years old.
Oh.
I was Nirvana released Nevermind in 1991, fall of 1991, and that was around the time I turned 8 years old.
See, I wonder like how that affects like the youth creatively if they come from a city where like major artists are blowing up around them. Like I wonder how that must feel for like kids in like New York or Chicago or LA.
Yeah.
You know, like that's got to inspire you in some way, knowing that someone in your backyard is basically
absolutely
that success.
And that's why when you hear about bands from smaller towns,
fucking Aberdeen eats Scarecrow.
yeah, exactly, or like even like Tacoma, even like when I'll Fight You kind of blew up off of like 3 or 4 shows back like 10 years ago now, 12 years ago. It was like, yo, these dudes are from Tacoma, that's dope as fuck. And yeah, you hear about bands, you know, getting success all the time from all sorts of cities in America, and I think that is important. I think it's crucial to the foundation of art that you see someone where you are from doing something that you think is cool, and it inspires you to do something cool because you know you can at least get out there. It's not like it's gonna be stuck between you and your circle of friends, or like 25 people in some random ass bar.
Yeah.
Like if you see somebody from your town that's like going on tour, then it's like, oh, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, very true. I feel like I was talking to my friend Carter about this yesterday. Like you can learn a craft at whatever age, but I feel like a lot of the times when you see like a famous musician or professional athlete, it's something that they've been like attached to since they were very young. You know what I mean? And when I look back too, like for me, podcasts weren't around yet, but like I saw like radio hosts at 92.5 or Cube 93 and things like that, and that was enough to inspire me to be like, wow, there's these radio hosts in Seattle that aren't too far from me whatsoever. And then, you know, um, eventually working at my favorite childhood radio station, and then seeing like Charlemagne in like New York, right? And seeing that not only does he have a radio show, he also has 2 different podcasts and a YouTube channel where he does one-on-one interviews, and being like, wow, there's different like routes you can take in this type of media. So I guess I did see enough for me to be inspired in that way. So for you growing up listening to music, first, did you ever try to be a musician, or at a young age did you know you wanted to be a writer or journalist?
Well, when I was young, and we're talking, again, like 8, 9 years old, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I had a lot of different little obsessions. I think music was the chief of those obsessions. And not only would I listen to music, but I would devour music magazines. Like, I would go to the grocery store with my grandma, and like, she knew to find me on the magazine aisle, because I would be reading Spin magazine, I'd be reading The Source, or later reading Double XL, and like really getting into the stories of the people who made music. And so like later I tried my hand at making music, and then it got intertwined in music writing, because at one point I was doing music criticism and putting my songs up on the same website.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
Were there some bias though then?
Not necessarily bias. I think I was just trying to explore, trying to see what I was good at.
Fair enough. And then how old were you when you like first started writing?
Man, I was like, I had to have been like 20 years old. This is before I started writing about music. Like, I think I probably had a MySpace, like most people my age, and I started expressing myself on their little blog, diary, whatever they called it. And then that led to me wanting to express myself in a different way than like, oh, today this happened, and try to really develop my craft as far as the art of writing. And then somewhere along there, I started writing about music, because I was still like reading magazines, even though magazines were dwindling. And I was reading blogs. I was reading Pitchfork. I was still obsessed with criticism and with well-written features about music.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I should try this. So I started my own blog spot in 2005, and started writing about music.
And what was the name of that blog spot?
It's a really embarrassing name now, because I feel like it's a total non sequitur, but it was The Armchair Novelist. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how I came up with that idea. I just thought it sounded really cool. And so I was like, that's it.
Damn, so can we still find that probably?
Nah, I think it's dead now. I think it's long dead.
So did you even end up going to like school for writing at all? Or like how did that end up? Wow.
I graduated high school, and then I dropped out of community college the day after my placement test.
What? Same here, I think. I went for a day, met all my teachers, and I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I was at the time I was managing a car wash, and like, making, I think it was $400 a week before taxes, which was kind of a lot of money. We're talking nearly 25 years ago now.
Yeah, damn. So how'd you go from a blog spot to eventually starting to get paid for writing? And how many years was that?
Ooh, It was a long time, I could tell you that. But so 2005, I'm, writing about music from my blog, not really understanding the craft of music criticism, not understanding its utility or its function, just kind of using it as a way to write about the things that I liked or express why I didn't like the things that I didn't like.
Oh.
And then
Wait, can you break that down real quick? So what is the difference between just saying what you like and don't like versus how it can be used to help?
So there's a lot of different aspects to criticism, but I think if it could be boiled down to one thing, it's always the question of, does this piece of music have value? Does it merit the value that its fans or music culture has placed on it?
Right.
And what is its value? What does it mean? I like to really get into what music means. Like, I feel like there are a lot of critics that still just kind of, I don't know, this thing's better than this thing, and Jay-Z's better than Nas, and you know what I mean. But I've always been interested in what an artist is trying to say,
right,
when they are making music, like what their artistic statement is. And so that contributes to what I think is valuable about it.
And how do you get that from without talking to an artist though? Like, how can you feel like you understand what an artist is saying without them straight up being like, this is what I meant lyric by lyric?
I mean, it's just, and it's a personal interpretation, really. Like, I cannot claim to know what is in an artist's head. So my criticism, my working criticism, is always my interpretation of what that artist is saying.
Got it.
And the funny thing is that I'm not necessarily concerned with the truth of it, because I feel as though when you make a piece of art and you put it into the world, it in a way doesn't belong to you anymore. And I have encountered a lot of artists who don't put a lot of weight in what they were thinking or how they were feeling when they were making that music. What's most important to them is how the listener interprets it.
And that comes off as like not, how would that come off as? Like maybe not genuine almost? Like if you're focused more on what the listener's feeling?
Yeah, but it's not the process of who your audience is when you're making it. It's you make it and then you put it out there. Right. And then you don't concern yourself with, you don't put your ego into the process. You put your art into the process, and then it comes out the way it comes out.
Right.
And even if you conceptualize it deeply, it'll still come out the way it comes out.
Right. That's interesting but there's also like, I feel like people, how do I phrase this in a non-offensive way? I feel like certain up and coming artists hear what you just say, and then they internalize it as being like, I don't care what anyone thinks, I'm making music for myself, and then when I put it out, and then it comes out on SoundCloud and it's like the worst thing you ever heard, and they're not open to criticism because they're making it for themselves, and that's what art is, So how do you deal with that? Because I almost feel like in the right mindset that works, but also in the wrong mindset, you can take what you said and use it as an excuse for why you as an artist, your music's not good.
I feel as though it's entirely a matter of opinion. Like I always try to give people the space to like or not like something. But at the same time, there are a lot of things I don't like.
Yeah.
There's a lot of whack shit out there.
Right.
And so I think it's just a matter of finding your process as an artist and going with it. You know, I have no qualms with people saying, you know, I make music for me. In a way, I write for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put it out, and, you know, people can take it or leave it.
Yeah, that is so wild. Opinions are the most wild thing out there. Because everything's opinion based.
Oh, especially nowadays, especially Twitter. Oh man, Twitter.
Oh my gosh, I don't even go on Twitter. Sometimes I'll go on Facebook to go on Facebook Marketplace.
Oh yeah.
But you have to click a few tabs over to get to the Marketplace icon. So sometimes I'll accidentally read someone's Facebook post. I'm like, Jesus, you're putting this online for people to read? I'm like, I don't know. Like, whether it's good or bad, I was always told to keep like personal stuff within your family and things like that. So it's kind of wild when I see like someone that I think I know just put everything out on a post or something.
Well, like we have built a culture because of social media where everyone is so attached to their opinions.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like a ball and chain situation, but it's also a delusion because the person doesn't think it's a ball and chain. The person thinks it's a golden sword that they are that they are storming the world on.
Yeah.
This magical, you know, tool that they are expressing their lofty genius opinions.
So how does that affect journalists then, when everyone feels like they can be a critic or have an opinion?
Well, honestly, it has diluted the form exponentially. I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of talk in my field about the culture of music journalism losing value. And I do think it's because, you know, so many people have held onto their opinions so tightly. Like if you don't lean into that sort of clickbait, you know, almost trolling people with a review, then it can be seen as merely a marketing tool for, you know, an artist, which insults me personally, because I feel as though music journalism is an art itself.
100%. And
yeah, it's just one of those things where it's that culture, the culture of opinion, where people don't. Back in the day, people used reviews as sort of, I guess you could call it like a buyer's guide, like whether or not something is worth listening to. And I like to think that that's still there, and people are forming their own opinions by reading something and being like, oh, this sounds like something I would like, or oh, this sounds like I should pass on that. But the culture of opinions has gotten to the point where someone will read a review that they disagree with and then go on Twitter and talk about how whack that person's opinion is.
Yeah, so like everyone can have an opinion, but at the same time, no one's allowed to have an opinion.
Yes. Yes.
That's wildness.
It's like you can only have an opinion if your opinion agrees with mine.
Do you think clickbait is here to stay?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, I wish I could say that one day we are going to go back to where journalism, to where criticism and features are substantial
Yeah.
and relevant and add something to culture. But no, I think clickbait's always going to be there. I think we're never going to go back on clickbait. It makes too many people too much money.
Yeah, that's very true. And the amount of people you see like say they've read an article. You know what? I don't even know why. Like I don't know why you always have to put a preface before you say you listen to like Joe Rogan or something, right? But he's right. But like Joe Rogan's easily like the best podcast. His numbers don't lie, right? He's like one of the highest paid podcasters in the world. He's world renowned, so you kind of have to give him credit, right?
I will say that he has very smartly tapped into his audience.
Very true.
I'm not the type of person that would normally give Joe Rogan credit for anything, but I can give him credit for finding his audience.
But like with that though, he has the most clickbait titles you'll ever see, with like news articles about him.
Exactly.
And then they take things out of context. So it's crazy how media can affect other media as well.
It does, yeah. That's been since the dawn of newspapers. I feel as though the primary source for news is oftentimes other news.
Yeah. That's just so. How do you prevent? Because here's an example. Sometimes producers or artists have to work with someone that they don't want to work with to pay the bills, right? So when does clickbait start to affect journalists? And have you ever felt like you might have had to make like a clickbait article or something to like pay the bills?
Well, I think that clickbait, it depends on where you work. Like I think there's a lack of clickbait, like true clickbait in music journalism.
Okay.
Just because either you're going to read about an artist or you're not. Either you're going to read about this thing that happened in music, like Win Butler, the dude from the Arcade Fire, and all of those sexual misconduct allegations. Like either you're going to read about that or you're not. Like I think it's more like a BuzzFeed thing, like a sensationalist grab, which doesn't really trickle down to at least the music websites that I read. I try to keep the quality high.
Yeah, I guess I see that on this. I guess that's not the most reliable source, but I do like hot new hip hop every once in a while because
that is some clickbait shit, my brother.
Like the other day, and this is a serious topic right here. So there's this battle rapper named Pat Stay who just passed away. I think he's from Canada, and he passed away from a stabbing.
Oh yeah, I know people who know him. Yeah.
And a few days before that, he had tried to defend Eminem because the game had put out like a 10-minute diss.
Oh yeah.
Towards Eminem, and Eminem hadn't responded. So Pat Stay was like, maybe I'll respond for Eminem, right? And then a few days later, he passed. And then Hot New Hip Hop went out of their way to try to connect the game diss to the stabbing, even though there was like no correlation whatsoever.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So like that's some crazy clickbait.
No, that's some straight up clickbait, some craven ass shit right there.
Yeah. So, but I feel like it does bleed over to like the New York Times or CNN or certain things. So, but you don't know if you feel like that doesn't affect Seattle as much, or just the certain places you work?
It's sensationalist. I mean, it's kind of everywhere, but at the same time, I think there are still certain practices for we'll call them prestige journalism outlets, there's still a code of ethics, like there are places like Hot New Hip Hop, unfortunately, that do the things that they do, and it's kind of the Wild West out there. But thankfully, like I'm one of those people that's very selective with like what energy I bring in. And so like I kind of stay clear of all that clickbait shit. And as far as my own career is concerned, I work a lot from the process of negation. I will quickly in a second be like, nah, that doesn't work for me. And I think that's a big part to why I have gotten where I've gotten in my career.
Right.
Because I routinely turn down the whack shit. And yeah, like even going back to when I was freelancing and, working at QFC, I was like, I don't need to do this whack shit. I can just, I'm already working at a supermarket. This shit is soul crushing. I'd rather do that than have to eat shit doing something I love for the chance to come up.
Right.
I'm the type of person that's like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Sometimes it's a detriment to me, but I've always done what I wanted to do, and music journalism is no exception.
How do you know how to like trust yourself within your craft though? Like for example, this is a very simple, silly example, but like I guess emails are different, but if it's like submitting like an application or even like a cover letter, I have to have so many people look over that. Like, even if it is good, I'm like, I cannot just submit this without someone checking that. So how can you trust, what did it take for you to, maybe you have editors, probably, I have no idea. But like, if you do, still, how long did it take you for like you to end up trusting yourself when it came to writing?
Well, first of all all good writers have good editors. And yeah, I'm working on a project right now with an editor, and I'm on my fourth and what I hope will be final draft. But yeah, it's one of those things where once you work in the field for a long time, you get a feel for what works for you and what doesn't, like through feedback from editors. Like I had an early edit very early on in my my career, so I was actually getting paid, where an editor told me watch for cliches, and I always remembered that. Like it felt kind of harsh at the time, but I always remembered that. I was like, okay, well, like, oh, this sentence is cliche, I gotta change that shit.
Yeah. Wait, are there writer and like editor duos? Like how there's like hip hop artists and production duos?
Well, I think there's a lot of turnover as far as writer editor relationships. And so usually the editor is working for a publication, and unless a writer is staffed at that publication, then they'll bounce around between several editors. Thankfully, I've had the same editor for about 4 years now.
Oh wow.
Dusty Henry over at KEXP. Yeah, he's the editorial manager. He's such a good writer in his own right, and he is a good editor in that he knows when I'm being too obtuse, but most of the time he just leaves me alone because I've been doing this a long time.
Damn. See, that's what you love to hear but hate to hear at the same time, that everything just takes time.
Yes. I mean it sucks for impatient people.
Yeah.
I have gained a I won't say bottomless, but a very substantial well of patience over the course of my life, and it has served me pretty well.
Hell yeah. So back to how long did it take you to end up making it a career?
Oh, we went on a real tangent there. Wow, that was a tangent and a half. Okay, all right. So I started 2005. Started blogging. I met my friend Jeff Weiss, who is, in my opinion, the best music journalist in the world, based out of LA. Around the same year, I think, maybe 2006. We were fans of each other's work. I think I wrote something on Raekwon's Only Built for Cuban Links, and he reached out to me and told me that he liked it. And so, we were friends for a few years, and then I asked him if I could bring a rock column to Passion of the Weiss. And the thought around that was because so many of the bigger music publications in America were kind of rock focused at the time, and especially like indie rock focused. And, hip hop would be shunted off to the side, and, there would be maybe Lil Wayne, maybe Gucci Mane, and that's about it as far as hip hop coverage. And so Passion of the Weiss was a hip hop blog, and I asked if I could write about rock music, and Jeff said yes, and I wrote 2 or 3 posts a week for about 2 or 3 years straight.
Damn.
And then Pitchfork asked me if I could write or if I wanted to write for them. And like, hell yeah, I want to write for Pitchfork.
That's wild.
At least just to see how it is. And yeah, it was an interesting situation. I think it's kind of weird for someone to go from like blogging to basically the big leagues, right?
Yeah. Damn, that is, and without like a college background to back you up on that.
Yeah, well, I think at Pitchfork they were just concerned about getting good writers. I mean, even to this day, they have a lot of writers. So, it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm not gonna start talking shit on your podcast about anybody.
Let's fight.
But there are some very incredibly talented writers at Pitchfork. Some of them are my friends. Some of them I don't know.
So do you have any ins at Pitchfork then?
Not anymore. I haven't written for them in like 8 or 9 years.
Wow. How long has Pitchfork been around even?
1996, if I remember correctly.
Really? Were they a magazine at one point, or have they always been online?
They've always been online. So they were early adopters of the internet music journalism thing.
Dang. So is that how publications found each other? Just through like blogs and stuff?
Yeah.
It's almost like when like Drake finds someone in the underground and like pulls them up almost.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jeff Weiss at the time was writing for LA Weekly, and they had been paying attention to his stuff there. I mean, the thing about music journalism is that all of the people who are dope know who all the other people who are dope are because we all read each other's stuff.
Got it. So at that point, have you always lived in Tacoma at that point, like in your like 20s, or did you move to any other states?
No, I was from 2 weeks after my 15th birthday until a year ago today, basically.
Damn.
I was living in Tacoma, yeah.
Air horn. So with that though, like, were you ever thinking, like, as you got these blog spots and then Pitchfork, were you ever thinking about working in Seattle? like at one of those publications, or how long did that take?
I never, because I was working on a national level, I never really considered like
Wow.
working locally until a certain point. There was a point in 2018 where, no, it had to have been earlier than that. It was like 2016. It was NPR. NPR was hiring a hip hop editor, and I was thinking about taking it. And then I was reading the job requirements, and I'm like, I do not want to move to DC. And so that's when I was like, like, I can be a music journalist from anywhere.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, because I knew people from, pretty much everywhere. Jeff Weiss was in LA. I knew people from New York. I knew people from Florida. I knew people from Ohio, doing their thing.
This guy was remote before COVID.
I always say that I was working remote before working remote was cool.
Another air horn. Only Blake air horns here. We don't need a real one. So how long were you working at Pitchfork, and then why did you leave that, and then where did you end up after Pitchfork?
So I was writing for Pitchfork like maybe 2-3 years, probably about 3 years. And then I started at MTV Hive, I believe, late 2011. MTV had the site before they turned it into MTV News. They had this music portal that a lot of incredible talent worked at, and it was called MTV Hive, and there were so many voicey writers, so much good music being shared. And I was doing that and Pitchfork at the same time. And then
that's baller as fuck.
It was crazy to get my first check from MTV, and like having Viacom on the top of the check. I'm like, damn, bro. But yeah, like I was doing both for a while, and then I decided to focus my efforts more into MTV, just because like Pitchfork has so many writers, and they weren't really giving me any features, and MTV was. So I was like, like, I'm ready to start doing more feature writing. And beginning of 2013, I wrote an essay called "The Only Black Kid at the Indie Rock Show," which was, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, and my experience growing up as a Black dude in the indie scene, the DIY scene. And yeah, in 2014, my beloved stepmother passed away. In 2015, my father passed away, and I thought I wasn't going to write anymore.
How old were you at this point?
I was like 30.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was rough. It was two years that I kind of lost.
Yeah.
But in 2018, Dusty Henry asked me to, well, let's rewind a little. In 2017, I was asked to write for Seattle Weekly. And at that point, I wasn't snobbish. I don't think I was snobbish at any point about local music journalism, but it was one of those things where I had never really had the time to do it because I was working for national publications. But 2017, Seattle Weekly approached me and was like, yeah, like, we like your work. We want you to work with us. And actually, I had worked in local media before. I did stuff for City Arts.
Okay.
2014, 2015, that era. But Seattle Weekly, really let me run with my stuff, and they gave me cool assignments. They let me write a cover feature on Defy Wrestling. That was pretty cool. I got my first feature on Ishmael from Shabazz Palaces, which, you know, not to throw any shots again, but I pitched that to Pitchfork and nobody got back to me.
So was it, you didn't ever feel like it was a step backwards to start being more localized?
No, because I felt as though this was around the time my mentality was changing about the reach of local music journalism and realizing that if there was one great, you know, music critic that everyone listened to, that everyone, you know, read and argued about and whatever, that you could go to any city and find out what's cool. Like, I would love to, like, just go to, you know, I don't know, Miami, Houston, wherever, pick up the paper and read an article by someone who is good at writing telling me what I should be checking out in Houston. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and it was like, I've been obsessed with this city for so long. Like, why haven't I been engaged in local music journalism? And it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a great way to express the character of a city or a region.
Do you think Seattle still holds true to that, though? Like, do you think they care about music journalism as much?
I think the people who work in music journalism care about music journalism, and I think the people outside of it don't really. I definitely feel as though there is not an emphasis on what we do. And I think it's not just Seattle, it's everywhere, where music journalism is sort of used as a promotional tool.
Right.
And local music journalism is seen as obsolete because the internet is the only music scene now.
So what do you think of Anthony Fantano? Is he your competition?
I don't consider him competition. I think he does something that I don't do, and I think I do something that he doesn't do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it's still in the same realm of music criticism, but like, I'm not getting on YouTube and
right. That's a good point. You could outright him, and he could probably be in front of a camera vlogging you.
Man, I don't know, man. I mean, not to say that he could wax me on the commentary, because I've been kind of what do you call it? Been kind of sharpening my sword as far as audio journalism is concerned. So I don't know, man. I mean, you might have to set up a battle.
Yeah, I'm down. Some of my artists have been on there, so
yeah,
hell yeah. So I think it's time to. Well, we're almost caught up. A few more questions, and then we'll be caught up to present, and then the next phase of this podcast, I want to talk about how you, the listener, if you're an artist, can build relationships with people in press. So you were working at Seattle Weekly. How long were you working at Seattle Weekly? And were you at any other outlets before switching over to KEXP?
I was at Seattle Weekly for about 2 years. And, you know, just doing stuff. I'm having fun. I'm still working at QFC. So it was like, writing was not necessarily a hobby, but it was a fun diversion. And at that point, especially after my parents died, I was kind of reconsidering pursuing a real career in music journalism. I thought I was just going to be a guy who does it for fun and, you know, gets a paycheck every now and again. But Dusty Henry approached me in late 2017, and a position had opened up at KEXP. It was Upstream Music Festival Liaison, which means I would be working between the station and the company or the festival, and on their booking team, which I did a little bit of. But the attractive thing about being the Upstream Music Festival Liaison is that I ran a local music column called Throwaway Style. And that was very attractive to me, and one of those situations that really deepened my love for the music coming out of Seattle. Like I'd been kind of tapped out for a while as far as what was happening locally. Like I knew the big names. I knew, Shabazz Palaces, Porter Ray, there were a few bands doing their thing that I was aware of. Wimps are one of my favorite bands to ever come out of Seattle.
I don't think I've heard of them.
They were doing their thing. They're really, really incredible and funny and insightful punk band. But I wasn't really tapped into like what was happening below the surface, or like I wasn't aware of like the bands who were just starting, or the bands who only had a name locally that didn't get the tour and weren't on big labels. And so being on Throwaway Style was incredible for me because I got to really dive into the mud with all of the people just starting out and people really trying to find their voice, and the people who have been underground for like dozens of years, and all of the cool, colorful characters in Seattle's music scene.
It's very eclectic here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you go about finding these artists? Was it through going to show? Like, do music journalists go to shows, like local shows? Like, I can see it if it's like Macklemore performing at Climate Pledge or something. But like, are you guys like on the ground?
Oh no, we're out there. Yeah, we're out there, bro. We're going to Central Saloon, Vermilion, even bigger venues like Numo and the Crocodile. We're going to punk houses where you have to DM to get their address, and we're really on the ground. We're really immersing ourselves into the music scene and just taking in good music first and foremost, but also like seeing who's out there, seeing who's doing things, seeing what's new, what's exciting. And yeah, it's really cool.
Do you get press passes for that stuff, or do you have to sometimes you have to like pay to go to them, or how does that work for like a station or someone trying to go to these local shows?
Okay, so
or is it like kind of like a hidden thing where you don't want people to know you're there?
I will say that post lockdown, I have been paying to go to more shows because I kind of feel guilty, because even back in the Pitchfork days, like I wasn't paying to go to shows. I was contacting publicists and labels and getting on the press list or the guest list. And so, yeah, like I didn't pay to go to a show for a solid 10 years.
So I shouldn't feel, should I feel, I don't know, I'm on my come ups too though. So maybe I shouldn't feel guilty that I can do that as well.
You shouldn't feel guilty.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I've been paying to go into some shows just because like it's so hard for artists to tour now. It's so cost prohibitive that you gotta hit them off financially a little. But also when I do get on the guest list, I try to buy as much merch as I can because I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Like I have this La Luz shirt on right now.
Yeah.
They're an incredible band. I buy records. I have upwards of 600-700 records right now and growing. So, like I think it is important to support artists financially, but thankfully there are more ways than paying for tickets, because I like to get on the guest list. I like to not have to worry about
same,
the ticket emails and the fees and everything that comes with being a live event ticket buyer.
We do our part by having you guys on our columns and our shows, so I think the least we can do is get a press pass or two.
No, absolutely. We are industry workers.
Yes.
We are working to spread your music out into the world. So like don't get a little persnickety if we were to ask for a press pass, because we're out here working for you.
This is the collab of the century, guys. Martin Douglas and NAST. They didn't know about this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna start off as this being a very general question, and then we're gonna dive deeper into it.
Cool.
How do artists build relationships with press?
It's I would like to say it's pretty simple. It's probably a little more complicated than I am letting on, but I think it's just a matter of reaching out to people, like looking at the masthead on websites and finding writers. But the thing is, the key to that is looking for a writer who would potentially like the music that you do. Because I get upwards of, I would say between 25 and 40 emails every single workday.
Jeez.
That's just promos. That's not even like work stuff or my Astro Poets newsletter that I get. It's strictly PR, and I skim a lot of it, and the first word I see where I'm like, nope, this is not for me, delete. So
mine is Yo Dog, put me on your podcast. Yo Dog, write a column about me. I'm next.
That's the full body of the email. Yo Dog, put me on your podcast. I'm next. Nope, delete.
Oh my gosh. Is there okay, first let's start with emails.
Okay.
Header, what should people be saying? Not the header, I mean what is that called? Like the
subject line.
Subject line. There we go.
Header works,
okay,
though.
Cool.
I mean, well, it's not a situation where there should be something that is like a tagline. Like, personally, I hate taglines in headers or subject titles. Like, I think it should be the artist and what the artist is promoting. And then, I mean, because most of us do actually read those emails. It's not like, oh, we're gonna delete this if if you don't have a cool name or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also some PR people like do this weird thing where they will put like a word stew in the subject line after the artist's name. Like it's always some identity qualifying thing, like,
oh, yes,
like Black, LGBTQ, and it's like, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is if your music is good.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of musicians all across the gender, racial, ability spectrum. But it comes down to, is your music good?
I have one qualm in Seattle. Um, and people can fight me on this,
Uh-oh.
but I feel that minority artists in Seattle are quick to say that if they're not being picked up by publications, that writers or media outlets are racist. And I don't know if I really agree with that here in Seattle. How do you feel about that take?
No, I feel as though it's kind of a straw man argument, because media companies are getting very diverse. I mean, speaking in the context of KEXP alone, like our editorial team is the most diverse team in the entire org. Like we have people of, all different, well, not all different races, but we have people of, it's a team of like 8, and we got
a black guy right here.
Yeah, got a black guy right here. And we've got another black guy. We've got, I think the women outnumber the men on our team as well. And we do have Asian women. We have our Latin American content coordinator, Albina, who is phenomenal. She brings in so much good music. She is introducing KEXP to an entirely new audience, and I think that's amazing. And I give a lot of kudos to KEXP for, bringing Albina from Argentina and having her build this thing, because the Latin American audience is so big for us.
Yeah, you guys you do a pretty good job, honestly, on, there's some Seattle artists don't get highlighted, which, just happens. But when it comes to like just artists throughout the industry that you guys highlight, like, I'm not, more than once I've gotten jealous. And I'm like, they've said yes to you guys, and I've been reaching out for however long. Like, for example, I'm just going to put this out there. And maybe I can't take all the credit for this, so fight me on this if you'd like. One of my favorite artists for the past year and a half, I know she was around in the 90s, is Lady Ray. Okay? So for you guys who don't know, Lady Ray in the 90s, she went by Nicole Ray, and her biggest song, or one of the biggest songs, with Missy Elliott and Timbaland. She had
it's a banger.
Yes. Make It Hot. Make It Hot. One of the most talented artists I've ever heard live. But during the mid 2000s, she kind of took a break from music and rebranded as Lady Ray. And from my opinion, it was almost like she kind of started from scratch again. Total name change, kind of different stylistic music. And I found her right after she put out her first single. And like, I was obsessed ever since. And I had reached out nonstop. She was like, what city should I come to on tour? And I was the only comment that said Seattle. She ended up coming to Seattle. I got no acknowledgement for that. I reached out. Her team said she was busy. Next thing I know, she's on KEXP. And I'm like, what the hell? And like, I'm the biggest Lady Ray fan. And then you guys got her. And I was like, at least she got Seattle attention. Yeah. I'm like, damn. So like, and there's quite a few artists. Like, you guys just had, was it Denzel? Did you guys just have Denzel Curry on?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
A few months ago, yeah.
Like you guys pull some like artists that deserve that attention. So
yeah,
kudos for that. By the way,
and we've been trying to branch out more, trying to get more musical diversity on KEXP. I know when I got hired, there wasn't really a lot of rap coverage on the site and rap being played on the station. And then, we switched up our format in 2020, and now two of our daytime DJs are, rappers. I mean, I don't know if Larry considers himself a rapper anymore, but he definitely used to rap, and he definitely is a very knowledgeable student of the rap game. But I think that's crucial because, Seattle in general and KEXP specifically, up to a certain point, were stereotyped as very white.
Yeah.
And so, that white indie alternative sort of crowd. But then, we slowly started to build our ranks and include, we had great perimeter shows like Street Sounds and Woe Pop, and even going back to Best Ambiance, but it was never like a focus. And now, with the work Albina's doing and Larry and Gabriel playing rap every day on their shows, and it's one of those things where it's like rap is like still slowly being integrated into like our overall platform. I think there's a lot of stuff that we could do. I won't say do better. There's a lot of stuff we could do more of when it comes to rap coverage. And, I'm a rap obsessive, been listening to rap since the womb, but I'm only one guy.
Yeah. That's why it's like a double-edged sword almost. Like, you want media companies to highlight certain people, but like as the writers get older, they're not going to as many shows, and then maybe a lot of the music they're finding is from secondhand, like hearing from other people. So like then it kind of comes to the artists knowing how to reach out to people as well.
Right. Tell me about it, man. I'm 38, man. I got to get home and feed my dog. I can't be out till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Going to shows.
Like, I'm young, so I'm able to do all this right now, but I don't know if I'm going to be going. And I already don't really like going to concerts, to be honest. Like, if I'm going to a concert, I'm very business mindset, and I'm like, if I can go to the green room and talk to the artist there, I'm going to the show. Otherwise, I don't want to be around a bunch of random people. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm doing what I can right now, but who knows? Maybe in the next 5 years, I might not even want to go to concerts at all.
Right.
So that goes to like making sure I have relationships with multiple media entities, so that we're all can pull from different groups of people.
Right. And I try to keep my ear to the streets, but there's so much stuff out there that if an artist doesn't reach out to a writer who they think will represent them well, then sometimes, it slips through the cracks.
Yeah. But what's the difference between reaching out and spamming someone? Because I bet there's certain artists that probably just try to reach out to every single person. And I would just assume, maybe this doesn't happen, but if I was working at a place like a radio station and me and all the writers are being hit up by the same person, it'd almost become like an inside joke where I'm like, did he reach out to you as well?
Yeah.
So like, how do you know if you're reaching out appropriately versus just spamming everyone?
I think an artist has to be very intentional about who they are reaching out to. I think knowing your audience is a big factor in whether or not your music gets listened to and covered appropriately. So I think, if you were in a grindcore metal band, I'm probably not going to listen to you, but I know somebody who would. Or if you're one of these, like sad, elegant indie artists that, kind of like kind of like soft adult alternative that's taking over the indie scene,
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to listen to your shit, but I know someone who would.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of those things where I don't want to say you have to, but it would benefit you to study, at least do a little studying on the writers that are in this music scene and figure out what they like, figure out what they tend to cover, figure out, their opinions about other artists who you might be influenced by or that you might find yourself collaborating with, because those things are all important. It's just a situation of really paying attention to the writers that are out there, especially the ones who are doing good work, because they are doing stuff all the time and listening to all sorts of stuff. And so if you are wasting their time in a way by, sending them 3-4 emails in a week about something that they don't really like, then that could hurt your chances of them wanting to show your music to someone else.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard, I don't know if this is something you should do or shouldn't do, but I've heard some artists write up their own press release and just have a writer just copy and paste that. Is that the wrong way to go about it, or who's wrong in that sense?
So I wrote my first big artist bio for Enum Claw's album that's coming out in October. And a lot of sites did that copy and paste job, and I thought it was really lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And ethically, it is kind of dicey because it's not the writing of whoever is putting that into the article.
Mm-hmm.
It's, essentially my writing. And yeah, like it's really, it's a bad look.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any more? I want to move on to Seattle now, but do you have any more advice for the general artist when it comes to like reaching out to you or other publications before we switch?
I would just say, don't make finding the person who will cover your art the focus. Make your art the focus, and then find the person who might like your stuff.
Hell yeah. And don't get discouraged if you don't hear back. There's so many writers out there, and people are busy, but if you're good, you have better chances probably.
Also patience. I can't stress enough that as an artist, you have to be patient to find that quote unquote big break. Like there are so many artists that kind of put the cart before the horse, and they'll hire a publicist when they've only done 4 or 5 shows and barely have a self-released EP out, instead of going out there and working on their craft. Like there's this band called Lemon Boy, and they're like a garage pop sort of alternative, like really good young band, and they don't have any recordings yet. They make their own merch, they screen print their own merch, and they're out there grinding, they're out there playing shows, they're out there finding their audience. And I think that's a beautiful way of going about it. Instead of thinking about your career before your career is even started, you should be out there honing your art, honing your craft, getting out there and grinding and doing live shows and bringing music to people. And it's been cool to see Lemon Boy from their very first show. They played a backyard vintage makers market that that my girlfriend's friend has in her
Oh,
backyard.
so they're from Seattle?
Yeah, and they're
Okay.
from
I'll
Seattle.
have to check them out.
And they've been playing shows all over town, and they're really coming up, and I'm looking forward to listening to their recorded output once they have some. But for now, I love going to their shows, and I love that they're not putting the cart before the horse. I don't like to say that people are doing things a right or a wrong way, because there's so many ways to, you know, do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many right ways, but in my opinion, Lemon Boy's doing it the right way.
It just takes time, which I hate, but it does. And you need time to evolve as a person, as an artist as well. Just, it's what it is.
Absolutely.
So let's get into the Seattle media scene. First off, do you think Seattle has the potential right now to break artists? Like, if an artist gets a Seattle Times and a KEXP and maybe appears on Como 4, does that hold the same weight as it did in the 90s, or has it ever held like enough weight to make an artist be able to go on tour or something?
Well, I think because the major label system is fucked, that bands are not going to get the same attention that they got in the 90s, no matter what they did as a band. But I do think that there is a very good network of publications and news sites and podcasts that are spreading the word about these brilliant artists that are in Seattle. And I think these publications, I think at least, you know, a handful of them still have the ability to break artists. I know that the editorial department at KEXP has broken a few artists locally over the past couple years. You know, groups like Mount Fog, or even, you know, my boys in Enumclaw. Like, I remember being told by the person who wrote their first Pitchfork singles review that they wrote about Enumclaw because they read my column. And so I do think there are outlets to get that artist to the next level in their careers. But I also think that it's a fucking crapshoot. Like, you never know what's going to catch on.
Yeah, because I think I've gotten out of this phase, which I'm happy about. But every music podcast that starts in Seattle, no offense to all you podcasters, I did it also, they just want to go on and like complain about what's wrong with Seattle.
Yes.
And they every podcast starts the same about like what's wrong with Seattle if they're a music podcast. But there is some truth, if everyone's saying something of a similar thing, that there isn't enough infrastructure here in Seattle. What is your take on that? Do you believe there is enough infrastructure in Seattle besides the music outlets?
I think there's not enough community.
Okay.
I think that there are a lot of artists that kind of get in their little cliques and collectives and micro cliques. And I see a few people kind of like reaching out and bonding with, you know, other collectives. But at the same time, I also see a lot of artists that are only about their come up. And, you know, they don't care about what's happening in the scene. They care about what they're doing. and they want to see themselves succeed at all costs. And I think that hurts the community. I think if we had more of a community, then everybody can shine. I
Right.
think, it's the cliche, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah. I think besides me being myself and that me saying what I'm about to say is bias, but I feel like me reaching out to you and other media entities in Seattle is important to help showcase that there is culture that might be overlooked by other entities, because something that I've seen and heard is, Seattle is a tech city, right? So a lot of times with that, more people are moving in to Seattle, which raises the prices of the cost of living in Seattle, which means like people that were born and raised in Seattle, a lot of them have to move farther and farther outside of Seattle, and that culture that they brought to Seattle gets pushed out farther as well, right? And then you see some tech people only be in Seattle for a few years, almost like a tour. And like I was at a brunch a month or two ago, and these tech people had just moved to Seattle for a few years from New York, and they're complaining about that there's no culture here in Seattle. And then the Seattleites are complaining that it's the tech people taking away culture, and then the tech people are like, why are you Seattleites not adding any culture to Seattle? So I really just feel like the community aspect is the important thing, but I still need to figure out how do you connect all that into one thing, because once you have the outlets connected more with the artists, right?
Right.
And if everyone's happy on that page, how do you get like the audience invested? Like, I don't know how you get that step going even.
And that's another thing about Seattle, is that it is a tech city, and all of these tech workers come in for their tours and then they go away, and then they drive up the rents and they push out the artistic class, and then they have the audacity to complain that Seattle has no culture.
Yeah.
And then they put the responsibility on us to make the culture for them,
Yeah.
who are the consumers, and all they're doing is out there consuming and not participating in the culture, not going to shows, going out to dinner.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe going to see Pearl Jam,
Yeah.
play Lumen Field or whatever, but they don't contribute to the culture of the city. And I feel as though it is very unfair of them to complain about how we are not building culture. And when, like, I've been to shows where there are 10, 15 people in the venue, and it's demoralizing because I know how hard these artists work. They give their lives to find their dream. You know what I mean? And so I do think that the tech culture that is suffocating the city has a lot to do with why shows are underattended and why artists can't sell records. Because in other cities it's fine because people are there to participate in the culture. Like, you go down to LA and like you can go to a hip-hop show, like just some collective that's putting on a show in a warehouse, and it's packed. You can go to a punk show and it's packed because people down there are participating in the culture. And it's one of those things where even if they're, like trying to be in Hollywood or trying to, everybody in LA is trying to do something, but they still participate in the culture.
So how do we get people to participate in the culture in Seattle? I say a little bit is if you know the types of people that are coming into Seattle, like the demographic, it doesn't mean you have to fit that demographic per se, but know how to market. Because I think if we're in a city where it's right there, you just don't know a lot of people don't know how to market themselves. And that comes back to connecting with writers and not knowing how to even market themselves to the writers that can help propel their career.
Right.
Like, so that's a big thing. But what would you say? Like, do you have any ideas on how to help build culture in Seattle?
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, because at the end of the day, we're only people,
Yeah.
and I have the extreme privilege of working for an institution in Seattle that does reach out to those people, and even though a lot of those people aren't necessarily my people, they're not my audience.
Mhm.
Like, maybe I can make some of them part of my audience and make some of them like read my stuff. Like, not make them, but like encourage them to read my stuff and to find their new favorite artists.
Right.
But I think as individuals in this community, it's difficult to find a good way to bring out the millions, almost million tech people that are out there, and get them to engage in our culture and our community. I think we just have to hold fast and keep doing what we're doing. And I know that the people who actually participate in the community are coming out and they're engaging and are finding great new artists and great new bands and dance nights and venues and little punk houses where you have to DM to get their address.
Yeah.
So we just need to not give up and move away.
Yeah.
And keep participating in the culture.
And I really do think if you get in the room with the right people, there's enough of a good argument on why corporations in Seattle should support the art scene, the local art scene. Because I do see, but it really is just like, because I do see that there's some like things going, this is so fucking weird. There's like, there are entities in Seattle that are like, oh, let's support the art scene. And then they showcase these artists that I'm like, who the fuck are these people even, right? So like there is people in Seattle that are in power that try to support the scene, but they're not even supporting the right types of people, which sounds bad. But then it's just, it comes off as almost corny. And I'm like, who are these random people that you're putting into a park and saying this is what highlights Seattle, right?
Yeah. So,
but if whoever can get in the right room with the right people and be like, first of all, Seattle is lacking in culture. There is an actual music scene where there's a community, and there's not these just like artists that are on the outskirts of even being in the community scene that somehow know the right person at whatever and is able to get a grant to perform in the middle of the park or whatever, right? But like, if you're like talking to the right people, if it's a boardroom or whatever, and you're like, there's a thriving music scene of different generations. I feel like the younger generation brings out a lot of people. Like the older generation's kind of lacking on being able to bring out people still, right? Because those people are starting to have families, right? But the older generation has wisdom to offer the younger generation, and the younger generation is able to pull out people, right? And that brings money to like venues and like sponsors. There's so much that art, and that it uplifts people too. Like when you're happy with your city, like that brings people together. I think there's just so much like an art scene has to offer to a city like Seattle. It's just the people that are in power they've been doing it for so long that they've kind of turned their head to what's new, especially because the people that they're working with as well aren't seeing it as either, because no one in the scene is being like, hey, we're here. You know what I mean? Like it's I feel like it comes down to marketing and reaching out to the right people, and a lot of Seattle artists don't know how to even reach out to the right people. And right, like I'm 3 years into this.